There's darkness in the heart of the little sinners you've made. And there's darkness in the hearts of the ones that you've taken in to raise. You don't have to look far. We talked about the darkness within us. And I believe if you look at any Bible character, someone mentioned in the Bible, you don't have to look far to find flaws in their faith. We elevate these people. We got to realize they had real issues, just like we do. And I think you'll see some of them had great faith and moments with great fear. I think you can look and you'll see that they had imperfections in their lives, but yet on some days they did really well. Some days, I look at them, they were just families with issues. There were days that they had great faith, and other days they had great flaws. But somehow, and in spite of all of those things, God applied grace. So while you might feel hang-ups about your family, and you may not like everybody that's in your family, and your family, my father-in-law, he's from Alabama, he would say, that family's got more hang-ups than a clothes closet. Your family may have more hang-ups than a clothes closet. But the truth is that somehow, if we become interested in the darkness that shows up at the house and work on that with intensity, we can help turn the lights on in the house. I love Ephesians 4 for this, because it really sets a standard of what a Bible culture is in the house. When I read the Bible, I realize that God never sought perfect moms, perfect dads, perfect kids, or perfect families. Never sought those. So if you're not perfect, you're qualified for this lesson today. Say, good, one I can make it through. What if our families were only meant to bring God glory? What if the whole purpose of our family was just to praise Him? What if the purpose of our family was to reach the world with the gospel? What if our homes were meant to be embassies of heaven? Anybody ever been in an embassy before on foreign soil? Anybody? Jane? Yeah? Anyone else? Layla? Yeah. You go into those, and Nathan Fry, yes, I just saw that hand in the sound booth. There was so much darkness in the sound booth, I couldn't see you. Chloe, you too? So when you go into that embassy, on whatever soil you are in the legal boundaries of that country, when you step on the soil into the embassy, you are stepping onto what is called sovereign soil of the nation whose embassy it is. So if you were, Jane, where were you? Or can you say legally? Okay. So if you're in Costa Rica or in Guatemala, you walk into that embassy, though the outside soil is that homeland of Guatemala. Inside that embassy, that's U.S. soil. Your home is to be an embassy of the homeland. And what if you saw your family not only as to bring glory to God, and not only as to bring Him praise, and not only to reach the world, but what if you started to look at your home as an embassy? An embassy of heaven. See, it's pretty ominous when you go to an embassy and they'll have a Marine detachment that's there. And these guys don't look friendly. They don't smile. They look like they want to hurt you. And they look like they're qualified to hurt you. Why? Because they want to stop all threats to the homeland. And what if we adopted that mentality for our homes and said, if we have an enemy on the inside, we're getting rid of the enemy. And if we have enemies on the outside that are trying to get in, We're going to stop them. And what if we began to look at the Bible in these passages that are before us this morning? And by the way, I am not going to get everything done. But I guess I shouldn't tell you this. But if you want, I've been given permission to give all of my notes from the whole week of everything that I didn't say, should have said. And then you can go back, he never said that because I ran out of time. But if you desire, we're working out a system that you can request it by email from the church office, and they can email you those notes from everything. It's about 20,000 words. A small book. But you could have everything if you want. So if you felt like, I didn't get everything, and I heard from several of you, it's like, I wanted it, you didn't, and you just... So please still pay attention. Please still take notes if that is of your heartbeat. But I already look at today's notes and I realize I'm not going to get done. But if I can hit some big points and make you think, then I feel like I've done my job. You know why I'm concerned about darkness at home? It's because homes produce missionaries. You say, well, churches. You have your kids more than anybody else. The missionaries are going to come from the house. If we can start to set up our embassies of our home to protect our family, and we use Ephesians 4 and 5 as a manual to help us to understand what does an embassy of heaven look like. Well, an embassy has to reflect the culture of the homeland. In fact, truly an embassy is to represent the culture of another land in a foreign land. And so the embassy workers behave differently. They have a different set of values than the local culture does. They have a different set of philosophies and ideas. If you're in an American embassy in Guatemala or Honduras or any of the places around the world you've been, know this: that's U.S. soil. And when you go home today and you walk into your embassy, realize the culture of our home ought to be the embassy of heaven. And it's what you're letting in that is going to hurt the culture, or if you will, a biblical culture for our home. Here's some lessons that I've learned. I wrote these yesterday. I've been saved for 51 years. I know it doesn't look like that. I've been saved for 51 years, and here's what I've learned. Four big truths before we get to specific teaching. Now, if I'm going to use a word, the word I want to use is called dysfunctional. I wasn't asking for volunteers, but you know what it is, right? If you've never heard the term, and I just made it like drop dead simple, I'd say something's not working in the house, okay? And you say, well, it's the plumbing. Well, this is a higher level than the plumbing. I'm talking about something is wrong in the function of the family. It's dysfunctional. If our families were meant to bring glory to God, praise to God, and reach the world for Christ, and be an embassy of heaven, and those things aren't happening, but rather our homes have become an embassy of darkness, then there are dysfunctions. And Ephesians 4 and 5 cover what some of these dysfunctions are and the realignment to get, what's the opposite of dysfunction? I don't want to say normal because, wow, normal's overrated. Function, I guess, functional homes. Number one, dysfunctional, don't even worry about trying to spell it right. It's like discount with a function and an ul on it, okay? Dysfunctional families cannot limit the plan, power, and promises of God. If you just want to put it simply, dysfunctional families cannot limit God. You say, this family is so messed up. But it doesn't hinder God's power in that home. God's power, God's promises, and God's plan still works in messed up families. And if you don't want to spell dysfunctional, you can put messed up. Okay? Just because in the home there's poor communication, partiality, jealousy, dishonesty, anger, vengefulness, disloyalty, and bitterness, none of those things hinder the power of God. A simple example, Joseph. In Joseph's family, Judah, his brother, married a Canaanite against God's design. Jacob was unfaithful and not monogamous. His stepbrothers plotted against their brother, and the brothers deceived. You say, well, that means that's a messed up family. But did God's power, plan, and promises work in a messed up family? Yeah. Messed up families don't hinder the power of God. For some of you, that ought to just be shouting grounds. What does pastor say? White hanky time? Because it's like, that's real. When you realize, you say, well, Brother O'Malley, if I even uttered how much darkness is in my home, I would be embarrassed and have to leave the church. I can tell you, if your home is messed up, you can't limit God with a messed up home. Number two, here's the second lesson I've learned in my time as a Christian. Messed up families, I'll skip dysfunctional, okay? Messed up families only write the introduction to your story. God writes the end. What do you mean the introduction? Well, you know, sometimes if you read or you pick up a book and you look, and sometimes there's a foreword, the word, that's not a four-letter word, that's different, F-O-R-E. There's a foreword, and that means that there's a word that comes before the story. And your family, they do write the intro of what happens in the early formative years. But when you give your life to Christ, God writes the end. Don't ever forget that. You say, well, my family was all messed up. I know. But the truth is that God will write the ending. If you go to Joseph's family again and see that his family mocked him, despised him, rejected him, and sold him out, what was God's ending to that story? The ending is, you delivered my people. If you look at David, King David, and look at him, he had mocking brothers, and he was just keeping sheep, and he was the unlikely of all to be chosen. That's the story his family wrote. What did God write? Well, I'm going to use you to kill a giant and lead my people and raise the wisest man that ever lived. Sure. Brother O'Malley, my past is so messed up. Well, if I remember right, someone held the pass sign about here. Who do you remember who held? Jess. All my past says is God writes a new ending. If you weren't here and you're wondering why is he holding up a pretend sign, it's a long story, but just pretend. It says past. Your messed up family only gets to write the beginning, the introduction. And God writes the end. Think about the story of Saul, the apostle. Saul who became Paul. What about his story? Murdered Christians. Persecuted Christians. What was God's ending? You're going to write most of the New Testament, and I'm going to use you to reach the world. Number one, there's a couple things I want to say, and I want to be super tender here and And I want you to understand, I'm speaking from a heart of love, okay? I don't know everything about the forward of your story. I can't know everything about your intro. I can't know everything about the dark places that you were drugged through as a kid. There's no way I can. But God sees you. And the intro of your story doesn't have to be how it ends. What you have to do is say, I live under the rules of a new homeland. I was once a citizen of darkness. Darkness was my culture. But when I trusted Christ, the newest chapter of my life began, and the forward of my story is not the end of my story, but it's rather the beginning of what God can do. God can take ugly starts and make brand new ends. So when we talk to you about darkness in the home, I want you to realize the four things I'm telling you. One, messed up families can't limit God. Number two, messed up families write the beginning of your story, but God writes the end. Number three, y'all are not listening fast enough. Number three, every home needs three values. Every home needs three values. What are values? Something you treasure, something important, something that is inalterable. You can't change it. It's written in stone, if you will. What are the three values that a family needs? Well, the beautiful thing is that no matter how messed up your family is, and you've had the worst model of what a family could be, and you would rather just burn the pages of your introduction of your life story, and you say, I have no model of what a godly family is, you do. You say, well, if you're going to revert to mom model and dad model, I can't even use my dad or mom as a model. Probably that's true. But I can give you a different model. The three values God provides in His home, I'll give them to you, three. And I'll explain them, but I'll just give you the list so you can write them. Love, significance, and security. If there are three core values to a biblical home, or a home with a biblical culture, a home without darkness, three things will be provided in that home. And if your home is not providing those three things, then by all means fix it. You say, well, I can't do that because I didn't have a model. They only wrote the beginning of your story. Everything after the intro, after salvation, God writes. So stop dipping back into the forward and the introduction and using that as an excuse as to why something can't happen. If God stamped grace on your past, you stamp grace on your past. Love. The three core values, quickly, I'll give them to you. This is under point 3. Jeremiah 31:3. Jeremiah 31:3. So just put JER 31:3. What does God love? How does He love? With an everlasting love. God always loves me. He loves me. But He doesn't love me any more than He loves you. What's your name? Christina with a K or a C? CH. Fancy. Christina. For me as a preacher, on Friday night. I was up there, and you were right there. And I had a sign, and it said unworthy. And your body movement, head, eyes, hands, something caught my eye immediately. And it was as if you were saying, that's my sign. And so you came and you stood somewhere up here by Kevin and held the unworthy sign. At the embassy of heaven, AKA, also known as the house, no one should ever feel unworthy. Everyone should feel love. You say, well, do we have to love them all? Yes. Even the cranky, mean ones, especially, they need the love of Jesus. And some days you just got to look in the mirror and say, I need the love of Jesus. And I got a list of people in this house who need a lot of Jesus, maybe even some coffee, but they need a love of Jesus. I'm sorry, who said what? You hate coffee? I don't have a sign for that. Number 2, Jeremiah 29:11 teaches me a core value of God. Significance. God has a plan for me. Could I say it even more simply? I am seen by God. One of the toughest questions I ever face when dealing with someone who's struggling with the darkness of their childhood is when they ask me, where was God when this was happening? I can tell you that you have significance with God. And while I do not, I can tell you, there are some things I understand about your trauma. But I want you to know, when you tell me, here is my trauma, which you do not need to tell me, but if you can show me and say, that's my trauma, I can look you straight in the eyes and I can tell you, I believe you and I see you where you are. And sometimes that's all someone needs to know, is that you can see them, that you matter. A large majority of people, just by personality type, feel like I don't matter. And what I say doesn't matter. And what I believe doesn't matter. Majority of Americans are like that. They'll just go with whatever. Can I tell you, there has not ever been a child of God that did not have significance or value to God. Number 3, remember what they are? Love, significance, and security. Deuteronomy 31, verse 8, I'm never alone. If I put the I ams beside it, the first one would be, I am loved. Number 2, I am seen by God. Number 3, I am never alone. God is behind me. God is before me. God is beside me. I cannot be afraid. I cannot be discouraged. He is with me. And if we will chase darkness out of the embassies of heaven at the house, if we can begin to just start with 3 of these things: offering significance, offering love, and offering security. Watching kids' personalities develop. I think of a little fella. He's 4. And his personality is already shaped and designed. It's there. This guy is incredibly intense. At 4. My mom even made it clear, he's just like you. I just want, he'll come, it will be in a context where I'll see him. I mean, he just walks in like he owns the place. He's 4. I was remembering reading about a child who had this kind of personality who went to their kindergarten teacher and negotiated. Why that? They did not need to take a nap. The 4-year-old, the teacher was so befuddled. She took the kid to the principal, and the principal became befuddled. Called the parent. And the parent who's raising this little human says, "Did you ever think of telling the child no?" They said, "No, it was a great idea." All these people in our lives are stamped with the image of God. And every single one of them need to know love, security, and significance. When I see that same 4-year-old acting out, I was taking care of him at one point. When I see him acting out, I just look in his eyes and say, "What's making you afraid right now?" So why would you ask that? Because if you have fear, you'll act out stronger than your personality is to compensate for your fear. You say, "That's messed up." Y'all look in the mirror, you got your own issues. But if everybody in our family could know love, significance, and security, just to simply say, no matter what happens today, you will always be loved. You're always important to mom and dad. And we're not going anywhere. Watched a situation develop in a family where there were great lengths of separation. And the child struggled with separation anxiety issues to a point where the person could not leave the room without the child. The parent could not leave the room without the child going ballistic. Well, it's a lot of issues at work here. You say, "Are there Christian families messed up like mine?" Raise your hand if you have a messed up family. I mean, be honest. You're in church. All right. Some of y'all have a lying problem. But the thing is that if we can develop those 3 core values to say significance, love, and security, we dispel the darkness. Here's the 4th thing. Is this 4th or 3rd? Wow, my numbers are messed up. I actually have 5. Now I've lied to you. Number 4, God can change who you are today. God can change who you are today. Christina held a sign that said, "Unworthy." You can call yourself unworthy and give yourself that name. But what's the name that we need to go by? Redeemed. That's our name. And everybody in our family has to know that God can change them today. Number 5. Every messed up home needs to practice forgiveness. For some of you, this is like trying to swallow an elephant. Because your whole personality and your whole style of living has been built on not forgiving. I choose not to get over that person. I choose to hate them. I choose not to forgive. If you want to fix the messed up functions in your house, start with forgiveness. And when you say to me, they don't deserve forgiveness, neither did you. This is how it's going to get easy. You were so messed up. And God said, forgiven. I flashed to a scene, and that's where I went away there for about 3 seconds and came back. So here's the scene. Lion King, first one. Rafiki takes his stick. Now, some of y'all just don't judge. You get past this. There's a little pun there, but anyhow. And he takes the stick and he raps him on the head. He said, what is that for? He said, don't worry about it. It's in the past. You want to live in the past? Help yourself. But the past is not going to define me. Redeemed is going to define my future. Redeemed is going to change my outcome. My story may have been written by some really creepy people, but the end is going to be written by God, and I'm going to follow His path. He said, did you just call my family creepy? But not, it was just kind of in a general sense. You want to fix darkness in your home? Jesus said, forgive 490 times to each person each day. And it's too deep, but it's really more than 490. Because some of y'all would keep a list. I got to 489. Do one more thing. And then we're at 490, and then you're going to hear it from me. Know who your kids are and teach them what it is to have a model of forgiveness. Make room for the differences of personality in your home, but never rebellion. Encourage individuality and togetherness. Maintain consistency in what you do and what you say. Practice discipline that is immediate and appropriate. Allow a generous margin for mistakes. 10:15 is quitting, right, preacher? Good. Sam just turned the light on so I could see the clock. 1. Got 489 to go. You're killing me, Sam. My point is, allow a generous margin for mistakes. I remember watching a missionary family with their kids, and the kid dropped a straw or knocked a napkin off the table, something, ridiculously minor. And I'm watching. Well, sometimes missionaries feel like that they're being observed all the time, and they don't want people to think that their kid is acting like a heathen. And the parent went off on the child. And God knows the naughtiness in my heart. He knows that. Monday night, my heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. And I said to the parent, with all the love I could muster, what are you going to do when they really mess up? Because if you just went off on them for whatever this straw or napkin, it was... Can I say S-T-U-P-I-D in this room and not anybody get offended? It was stupid. And yet, and if that offended you, please put me on the list as 1. There's got to be a margin for mistakes. You're shaping a child's life. So they messed up. Should we go over your list before you get to theirs? Oh, all right. Pastor, I did tell them that we'll make all the notes available through the church office by email. I looked, it's about 20,000 words. Yeah, really. Think of all the stuff, how long I took, and I didn't say everything. I'm going to give you some statements about what the embassy of light is for your house. Now, one of the most precious people in my life has come in the room, Libby. Hey, Libby. She and her husband and kids used to be missionaries to South Africa, supported right here from this church. And Libby and her mom is here. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. When I say these lists to you, it took me 5 days to preach this list at Libby and Michael Lovett's church. I'm going to give it to you in 4 minutes. Don't tell the folks at Graham Road that I did it in 4 minutes. The embassy of heaven has to be a home of holiness, a home of grace, a home of love, a home of obedience, a home of honor, a home of godliness, a home where the scripture is practiced, and a home